I'm Dan Goddard, ceramic artist, potter, and I'm going to do a couple of pieces here, and I'm going to try to get about a gallon size so that it can actually hold a gallon. So I'm going to use a bat here, and I am going to do what I just said and put a little bit of moisture. This one thing you can do on this particular type of bat is actually give a little bit of moisture around the edge and on it, and it can actually help the steel a little bit before I throw a bunch of weight on it. Now, I just did something that also can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. I just made that bat slippery. So the bat or the wheel head doesn't need to be slippery, it needs to be sticky. I don't know if you can see this. I'll reach over here and touch another wheel head. If you look at a wheel head after it's been cleaned up and before you use it, you'll have a powdery film on top of it. That powdery film actually reduces the ability for the clay to stick to the wheel head. Okay, so what I'm shooting for is sticky, not powder dry, but sticky, so that when I put that clay onto the wheel head or the bat, that it sticks pretty well. Okay, so in this case, if you didn't know this, I've heard all kinds of debates over this, but I'm going to say it. If you didn't know this, the phrase throwing actually came from that activity, smacking the piece of clay down to the wheel. Now, I don't usually do that, by the way. I usually place it on there. And so I put that onto the wheel head, onto the bat. And what I do, my technique is I just kind of push this into a Hershey's Kiss. Okay, so at the same time I'm pushing this into a Hershey's Kiss, I'm pushing down as well. So that's helping that piece of clay stick to the bat, stick to the wheel head more or better. Okay, and what you're going to find, part of the reason I'm using the bat is to also illustrate bat wobble. Okay, so this bat is a little bit warped, so I did that on purpose. You're going to say, yeah, right. Okay, so I did that on purpose, and so I'm going to try to illustrate a little bit of bat wobble. Okay, another thing you want to be aware of is there are certain wheels that are lighter than others, and they'll walk on you. I've used these speed balls for many years. They're a pretty good wheel. They're not what I would personally use for my personal stuff. I would prefer wheels like a Scud or a Bailey or a Soldner, or I grew up on Lockerbie's, a big old massive kick wheel with a motor on it. I'd go through many bushings. This thing will actually walk. So if you get a really heavy, even though the motor will handle, this particular model I believe handles 100 pounds of clay on the wheel head. So what that means is I, in theory, can put 100 pounds of clay on the wheel head and manage it, and I won't drain the motor completely, ruin the motor, okay, and it will balance it. But they're light enough and they wobble enough that the wheel can walk on you. Okay, so if you get a really big piece of clay and you're trying to center a big piece of clay, even this piece of clay is probably big enough to do that, and you're pushing into it, if it's stiff and you're trying to manhandle it, it can kind of walk around. Again, part of this too depends on the surface that the wheel is on. As a pastor, I've had these up on used wheels as the pulpit, basically. And if it's carpet, I'll put down a tarp and some plastic. They'll really walk on you if you're doing that. So, different kind of wheels. This is mid-range, a poly type wheel head as opposed to a metallic wheel head, spun aircraft aluminum, something like that. Okay, this is a little bit different. Okay, now I want to talk about body positioning. This is contingent upon the potter as well. Talked about Michael Wendt and his clay. He actually throws standing up. He also uses a very small fulcrum, that would be the right word. So his wheel heads are like 2-3 inches in diameter, but he throws very big, he can throw really big pieces on that. So he throws completely different. I've been at demos and clay shows and where people actually throw them this way, off of an axle of a vehicle. So This wheel style is pretty common. This three-legged wheel style is pretty common. So I'm going to show you what I believe works for me. Everybody can be a little bit different, and it's about body position. The first thing that we need to understand about body position is your body is the tool. You got to be one with your body, right? You have the clay in your body. It's not your hands. Okay, even though this is the point of contact, it's not your hand, it's your whole body. Why this becomes important is the position of the wheel in your body and working the clay effectively, rapidly, whatever. It's important. We all kind of get into different habits, some of them good, some of them bad. We all have different techniques, some of them good, some of them bad. But your positioning over the piece of clay and the way that you connect to the clay and the wheel and the splash guard, it's important. So body position is important. So when I'm teaching somebody to learn to use the wheel, I literally tell them to hug the splash guard, in this case, with their crotch, with the inner thigh, right? So they're actually clamping onto that wheel, okay? And you're pulling it in all the way up against your body, and your center of gravity is over the top of the center of this piece of clay. What that does is it enables me to use my body as the tool. The other thing is bracing, okay? If you watch what I'm doing here, in a bigger piece of clay, I'm always bracing. So my forearm is going to touch the top of my thigh to the edge of the splash guard. The hand is just a point of contact. It's inevitable. New students come in and they're free-handed. They got their hands out here and saying, why can't I get this centered? And it gets over and wobbly and further, right? It's because they're not listening to when I tell them that they need to brace. Their body is the tool, the hand or whatever is the point of contact. If I throw them with my elbow would be the point of contact. The point of contact is not how you force the clay. You work with the clay to get it into place, or what you're trying to do, into the position you're trying to make it. So these are just points of contact. So bracing, my forearm's on my thigh. Sometimes it'll be in my gut. The other thing is, if you're throwing a lot of pieces, if you get too far across this center line with this would be really uncomfortable. So what I'm trying to do with this hand, I'll call this my dam hand. This is the one that I'm using as a dam to hold the clay or push the clay into place, okay? So I have a center line here, all right? And it's right at the palm, base of my palm right here, okay? My forearm's down on the top of my thigh. I'm hugging the splash guard, the wheel. I'm leaning over the top of it, and I always brace, brace, brace. My body needs to be rigid to the point. I don't know if you've ever been around a wood lathe. If you're been around wood shop or wood lathe, they have a crossbar, a brace, right, that they rest the tool on. So the piece of wood is turning like this. If they just tried to freehand it, they would potentially lose control of that tool that's carving into the wood. So they have a stand. I don't know what the actual tool is called, the stand, the tool, and the tool rests across that, and it holds it in place. So the point of contact is the tip of the tool, but the tool is really back here, and it's resting across a bar. So the weight and position and bracing is really important for you to learn how to center a piece of clay, okay? And then even work with it. So I've got my Hershey's Kiss. I got a bat attached to the wheel head. I might get bat wobble. I want to get a little just to kind of talk about bat wobble. One way to relieve bat wobble, again, get that liquid seal down here. If this is a warped bat, probably should throw it away. But I can also take clay, which is what we did with plaster bats, and I can take clay and just put it all the way around here to seal that down to relieve some of that wobble. The other thing is, if these holes are waddled out too much and I'm not putting too much weight going back and forth like this, I can actually put clay around the bat pin as well. That might help. Okay? So I will stop talking a little bit. In tight, over top, brace, brace, brace. What I do is I start full speed. Okay? So these wheels will turn pretty fast. So I'm starting full speed, because I'm going to manipulate this piece of clay into place. So the first thing I'm going to do when I push in and down, I'm going to make sure it's sticking okay. Okay? So I'm kind of pushing down a little bit. I'm not so worried about center yet. I'm just making sure that that thing sticks to the bat pretty well. Okay, so I'm pushing down and in. Now, if I go in this fast with this much clay, if I don't push it into center a little bit as I cone up, that's what I'm doing now, I'll get a big old woo, woo, woo going back and forth like that. Okay, so I'm going to cone up. Okay, again, coning up does some of the things that you would do with wedging on the wedging table. I got a wedging table back there. Okay, so I'm going to cone up some more. Slippery, you want to make sure you're slippery. Alright, so I'm coning up. I could do this a lot faster if I wasn't talking. Okay, and then as I cone down, the thing I want to do is I want to maintain that point of the cone. If I flatten out the cone and it gets flat, what happens is I get a lot of slip and water trapped in there, and that can actually be introduced back into the clay, and I just ruined what I said about I don't really wedge that much. I'd have to take this off and possibly wedge it anyway because I've got moisture and the density of the clay is not consistent throughout, so it's not well homogenized. Okay. If you notice down at the base of this, not only could I potentially have bat wobble, but see how my hands are shuddering? So I hadn't centered the bottom well. If you don't center this bottom well, and even if you're centered up here, right, you could actually throw your piece off by, as you pull up. I'll put my knuckle over here for this camera. As I pull up, I could actually throw it off because this place right here isn't well centered yet. Okay? The other thing is if you look at this piece of clay as I've coned it up, I got this cone, is it has like ridges in it, like a screw is going up. Okay, this is an indication of memory. So when I pulled this up, I coned this up to this shape, the clay has memory or elasticity that's wanting to stay in a particular shape. So I need to remove some of that tension in the clay. That's another reason that I cone up and cone down, not to just homogenize the clay well, but also to relieve some of that elasticity or rigidity, memory that's in the clay, because I don't want it to try to go back into shape. You can actually have a piece thrown, take it off, let it dry, and it will warp. That can be from memory. On the slab roller, which is over there, I can get warpage in the clay body at times. That can be the memory of the clay trying to go back into the shape. It can happen in a kiln too. I can fire, and it can go back or warp into a position that it wants to go back into. So those are all potential things you want to look at. All right, so I coned up. I'm going to actually go back at this a little bit and go at the base. Again, brace, brace, brace. The reason I'm going at the base is I want to get that center at the base as well. So it's all about the point of contact. You see it's to go, what? Look out, it's going to take off. No, it's not. I've got a hold of it, okay? The bracing of this, my body, touch, hands are just point of contact. It's all how I learn how to control the clay. So I want that piece, the point at the top of this cone, I want it to stay in a cone. So this is my dam hand, and I'm going to put my dam hand in here, and then I'm going to push back down, right? To keep that at an angle, I'm going to use my hand as the dam. In this case is my left hand. It's funny because I'm left-handed, and when I first started to throw when I was a kid, between 6th and actually even before that, I can't remember. Anyway, so one of my teachers was watching me, and he was amazed. There's something wrong. So for some people, I throw backwards. Who is it? Lynn? I can't remember if it's Lynn or another known potter out there. He actually throws with this hand as his dam or bracing hand, so that his fingers the clay is going away from his fingertips. I throw it this way. His opinion is that I could, gouge in and, not necessarily good position. So again, it's all what we are able to do in technique and learn to do, and etc. So we're all a little bit different. Okay, so I coned that up and I coned it back down. I'm going to cone it up again. Again, the idea of the coning up and coning down is to actually relieve some of the tension in the clay, homogenize the clay. If you got a big chunk of clay that's not well homogenized in the center of this clay, as you pull it up, you're going to find it's going to throw it off center because you got a soft piece of clay in the wall, you got a harder piece of clay in the wall. So sometimes, and you might even see it on this piece, I don't know. Sometimes you'll see the top of the piece going up and down like this, right? Because it's not even. That can be because the clay was not well wedged, and there's a denser piece of clay inside the clay body and less dense, and that causes that. That can be that. There are other reasons, but that's one thing. Okay, so homogenizing the clay, coning up and coning down. The other thing is coning up and coning down is helpful for relieving air bubbles as well. Okay, so if you watch my forearm over here on my left, it is really braced hard against the top of my thigh. The other thing you need to watch is my hand that I'm pushing down, coning down with, my right hand, is it's actually touching my left hand. So I'm using my whole body, all right? This is pretty stiff clay, by the way. So it's not for the faint at heart. It's fresh clay, but it's stiff clay. Okay, so I'm going to cone up again. I want to keep that cone at the top. I'm kind of pinching with my thumbs at the top. Some slip there, right? Okay, I want to make sure that the bottom is centered as well, or else it's going to throw it off. See what it does? Okay, I could lose it if I'm not careful, right? So I want to make sure that that bottom is centered as well. All right, cone up, cone down. All right, so it's not perfectly centered yet. Perfectly centered is subjective, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to move into this with my dam hand and just put body pressure into it and onto it to get the clay to center. Okay, because I've coned up, coned down. I'm going to get the clay to center. All right, a little bit more. Coned up, coned down, get the clay to center. Okay, so rigid, body position, point of contact is your hands. Don't try to freehand it like this. Cone up, cone down. We're working with a bat, and I guess I lied because this bat doesn't have nearly the wobble in it I was thinking it had, so I wanted to show you how to deal with that. Actually, another thing is to seal, to get an airtight seal, I could actually take some of that slip and stick it in there. Careful you don't cut your fingertips if the bat's chipped up at all. Okay, so that's not absolutely centered, but it's pretty good. Okay, at this point, once I've centered it, I've coned up, coned down, and I've centered it, I'm going to actually slow the wheel down a little bit. Alright, slow the wheel down just a little bit. These pedals are not my friend. Alright, so slow it down a little bit. So start it at full speed, slow it down to half or 3/4. And for me, different people open differently. You know, people go like this, people go like this. I use a butterfly effect. So I've got my forearms on my thighs, I'm over the center of the piece. I use my thumbs together, and I'm just going to rock those thumbs or slide those thumbs across the top a couple times just to make sure that I don't have any uneven surfaces at the top. And as I do that, I'm just kind of checking for center, finding center, because I don't want to put my thumbs or my hand into it and throw it off in the center, because then you have, even though the outside's centered, the inside is not centered. Okay. So I'm going down and I'm rocking my thumbs into the piece of clay as I go down. All right. Remember to keep it as slippery as possible. We have friends out there oh, Nolan, he's quite the potter out of Florida, and he travels all over the country teaching people kind of micro businesses, and he uses pottery as part of that. And he has to go parts of the world where they don't have that much water. So he literally has to teach people how to throw with little to no water, which to me that's a kicker, because I don't know, I haven't really tried some of his techniques, but that would be, you got to keep it slippery is what I'm saying, okay? So I've gone in with my thumbs, then I'm going to actually go in a little bit with my hand and my fingers, just a little bit. Now, finding the thickness of the bottom, okay. This is not optimum, and you got to be careful when you do this, okay? Some people could actually take, as a practice, because they're having a little bit of a problem finding the bottom, how thick the bottom is, could take a needle tool, stick it down, and measure how thick it is that way. The downside of doing what I just said is, as I poke holes in the bottom, I could also introduce moisture and other problems as well. So I don't necessarily recommend it. It's one way as you're learning to teach yourself how thick, how far down did I actually go. That's one technique. The thing with the bottom of this piece, as I go down in here, it's holding water. So it's got a little water down in there, it's got moisture down in there, and that moisture is actually penetrating the base between the bottom of the piece, the pot, whatever, and the bat or the wheel head. So it's holding more moisture down there. What happens is, if that is not the same density as it dries, and it's not well compressed, if that's a different density, I should say correctly, if it's a different density, then the walls of the clay, it's going to shrink at a different rate. So if it's not compressed or it's too moist and you get too much water trapped down the bottom, it's going to crack. So if you use that technique to see how thick the bottom of your pot is, be careful and watch. Different clays do different things. I could actually introduce a crack by doing that over time, okay? Because I got too much moisture in the bottom. All right, let's go on. So I'm at about half wheel speed. I can feel the length of the clay, or how deep it is in the base of the clay, just by touch, kind of look and touch. Okay, so opened it up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and up. Now, the thing about pulling up, because we can all do it a little bit differently, is the thing about pulling up is you want, however you grab the clay, you want consistent pressure inside and out as you pull up. And I'm always going to recommend that you try to go in cone shape or cylinder. You might get it out a little bit, you can neck it back in. But try to go as straight up as you can, keeping the pressure as you're pulling up consistent inside and out. If you take too big of a bite down at the bottom and make it too thin, and you have a lot of weight at the top, you're going to have a problem dealing with the thin spot down at the bottom because you got too much weight at the top. So you want to keep those pulls consistent. You can pull pretty fast. It depends on how skilled you are, how skilled you become. But I'm going to go at about half speed. So I'm actually pinching. So I'm actually grabbing the clay at the bottom here. I'm also going to use this hand as I pull up, and I'll brace them together. I like to use a little knuckle thing here. Okay, so I'm going to pinch, and I've got my hands over here touching. I'm sorry, that one camera is not showing. I should put it on the other side. And I'm just pulling up. Okay, trying to open that up a little bit. The other thing you want to be careful of is you don't create a ridge right here that you have to deal with later. Robin Hopper has that good pinch technique. If you get the top off a little bit, he would actually take the crotch between his fingers right here and go in, pinch, and push down, and that levels the top off for you. Okay, so that's one technique that works good. Since this is a real stiff clay, if I don't keep it slippery enough, I can get a little bit of chattering or shudder at the bottom as I pull up. So I want to keep good moisture in the bottom. Okay, so here we go again. We're going to pull up some more, pinch and pull up. Okay, again, I'm going really slow. I should be done by now. Okay, so I want to keep that cone shape as much as possible. So I pulled that out a little bit at the top. I'm going to actually push it back in. The bigger the piece, I'm going to challenge you, potters, the bigger the piece, the more weight of the clay, you're going to exaggerate that cone more. So if I had like 50 pounds of clay on here, in my experience, and also people that I talk to that have been throwing for years like me and throw really big pieces all the time, a lot of them, most of them that I know, are going to keep that cone shape exaggerated as much as possible. Okay, so in some cases, if it was way out here, that cone would be really, and I'd be kind of pulling up like this rather than that, if that makes sense to you. Don't know if it does, but I'm going to stick with it. Okay, so got a lot of moisture in the bottom. Bottom's pretty flat. I could probably go down a little bit more in the bottom. I don't have a camera to show you in there, but I'm going to push down a little bit more. Can go a little bit deeper. I'm probably at about a 1/2 inch at the very bottom. Thickness right down here. Okay. All right. And as you, so I started full speed, coned up, coned down, started full speed. As you start to open this up, and the thinner it gets to keep control and the softer it gets to keep control, you're going to gradually slow the wheel down. All right? So, there you go. Like that. Got a lot of moisture in the bottom, so I'm going to take a sponge, pull it out, pull some of the moisture out. All right, as I feel with the sponge, I can feel what happens, and it's not a bad thing, is it actually goes, so if you reach down into the clay, so from here on the inside, what it does is it goes out and so it gets thicker. So it goes down like this and then it gets thicker right in here. So what that means, I got a whole bunch of meat down in this area right here that can go up here. Okay, so I want to deal with that. I'm going to grab in, take a good bite down at the bottom. Okay, pull up. It's not perfectly staying in perfect shape, but it is coming up right. Okay, I told you to make a cylinder. It's got a cylinder with a spare tire in it. For those of us that are older. I'm going to slow it down a little bit more because I'm getting about a 1/4 inch thick. Okay, so I've got about a 1/4 inch thick. If I get too thin down in here, I have a problem dealing with this as I maybe pull it up a little bit more or shape it. I'm looking in, feeling it. I've got pretty good meat in here, but it's getting close to between a 1/2 and a 1/4 inch right in this space right here. So don't necessarily, based upon what I'm trying to create, I put a gallon jug over there just to give me an eyeball of about a gallon because I'm going to make an urn, a burial urn in here. And by the way, calculations on a burial urn is a little bit over a gallon content inside the urn, about a gallon, a little bit more, so it's like 1.02 gallons to a 250-pound person as general speak. So really, to cover everybody, an urn should be between a gallon, adults, to a gallon and a half, which would be a very big adult. You'd probably go up to 300 pounds. I know it sounds kind of morbid, but so this is going to hold about a gallon of water. Actually, this will probably hold more than a gallon of water, but that's what I'm shooting for. So I've done it, centered it, coned up, coned down, actually coned up, coned down, centered it, talked about the bat. I'm going to open this up a little bit more at the bottom, or widening is what I'm doing, not opening. Okay, so I'm widening it a little bit more at the bottom. And what I'm going to do at the top is I'm actually going to choke it and pinch the top and close the piece completely off. So it's about a 1/4 inch. It looks like it's thicker than that at the very top, but I left a bit of some meat at the top here. Okay, now I don't want to lose it because it's getting pretty soft. So I'm going to comb that in just, or neck that in just a little bit right through there. Got some meat at the top. Okay. If I don't control the top, get too much meat at the top and a thin spot down in here, which it does have, it'll actually scallop and collapse on me. So I'm going to pull a little bit more up here. Okay. Come out just a little bit more. All right, now get a little bit more content space in here at the bottom. Push it out just a little bit more with the sponge. A little bit more right through there. Because it will shrink, by the way, if you didn't already know that. Most of the potters already know that. Open it up, get a little bit more down there. Because I want to get about a gallon to a gallon and a half of content. So we're probably a little bit more than a gallon if I look at that jug. My eyeballs are correct. Okay, and here's the way. This is a silly measuring tool, but okay, so I can just take this and set it next to it and say, well, you know, that's, it's probably about a gallon. Oh, hit the piece of clay. It's about a gallon, right? Maybe a little bit more. All right. It is going to shrink. So I'm making a burial urn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch the top completely off, I believe. I'm going to pinch the top completely off. I don't know if you've ever done this before. Depends on your skill level and how long you've been working at pottery. But the closing off the top is I'm going to form a lid by closing off the top. I'm going to trap air in the top. Okay. It's pretty dry down there. Maybe flatten the bottom off. I got a couple of different ribs. I want to compress the bottom really well, or I'm going to have a problem with cracks, or could have problems with cracks. The thing you don't want to do with burial urns is make them top heavy, because you don't want them to tip over. So this particular shape, it's going to be wider at the bottom, more weight at the bottom. All right, put it down there. It looks pretty good in the bottom, nice and clean and flat at the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to neck in the top. I'm going to close the top completely off. Okay? So I want to make sure it's slippery. I don't want to get any chattering or scalloping because it gets sticky and stuck to my hands. So I'm going to take 3 points. Thumb, index, top index finger, and middle finger. I'm going to go in. If I try to do it like this, you can, but when you're shrinking, those 3 points, actually 6 points, is going to actually help you shrink the piece better than just trying to choke it with your whole hand like that. So shrinking it with those 3 points is going to be more effective than grabbing it like that. So I'm just going to do this. Okay? And as you shrink it or reduce it, it's going to get thicker. The walls of the piece are going to get thicker where it's shrunk back in, so it gives you a little bit of meat you can use to pull. All right, keep going, a little bit more, and it continue to shrink. By the way, if you're a Halloween pumpkin person, I can feel a bit of scallop in there. If you're a Halloween pumpkin person, this is one way that you can make pumpkins. Is you just make the round or the shape that you want, pinch off the top, then you can manipulate and sculpt the vine top, the handle to the piece. Same technique. Okay. So there's a little bit of a wobble in it, but in order to get it clean, closed off, I'm going to have to get a little bit of a neck there so I can pinch it in a little bit more. I don't want to collapse the top either, so I got to get enough meat toward the top as I neck in so that I don't collapse the top. Pinch a little bit more. A little bit more. And sometimes if I don't get that, if I get it too thin and try to neck it all the way in, I can collapse it. So I gotta be careful with that. See how it's kind of going off there? You don't want it to cause it to collapse or go in the wrong direction. So pinching, 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 pinching. Okay. That just shows you that I'm a little bit off at the top. Okay, I can actually, at this point, I can actually just stop it and pinch it off. I can do that. So what I did is I actually created more of a trimming issue by doing what I just did. But you can actually get cracks at the top here as well. So if you're not careful. Now what I've done is I've caused air to get trapped inside of the top of this piece. Okay. If I would have done that how I normally do it, I would have pinched it all the way up and I could have built the handle that way as well. I can still do that. But so I'm trapping air into the top of this piece. This piece is actually going to be thrown in one piece, but I'm going to cut the lid as it turns leather hard. Okay, so I've trapped air in the top of that. Now normally, again, what I said is I would actually do what I just did and I'd pull the handle up, but I was talking, wasn't paying attention. All right, so I've got that shaped like that, and what I can do is I can actually manipulate it a little bit, get a little bit different shape in it. If I don't like the way the top looks, I can take a rib, right? And I can smooth that out a little bit there. I don't want to press down too much because I'm not trying to create a divot. If it's too wet, which is pretty wet right now, if it's too wet, I can just stop right here and come back to it right away. Okay, so push the top up a little bit more. Get that shape that I'm looking for back into it, maybe. It's getting pretty wet. All right. Now, if I look down at this piece, I'll take, what I had was a stiff rubber rib. Kemper Tools have been making these ribs for years and years and years. Black, in this case, is stiff. Blue, I think that's right, is medium. And then red is soft. I'm going to take a soft rubber rib and just kind of clean up the side. I don't know if you can see this here. I'll do it over here so you can see it. So I'm just taking the soft rubber rib and cleaning up the side. Making that nice and smooth for later when I decorate. Don't have the finger tracks in it. All right. Okay, so that's pretty much what I'm going for right there. Now I'm going to clean up the slip off of it with a damp sponge that was wrung out. Again, going slower than usual. This video is probably a little bit long, going slower than usual, just to talk you through this. There's a little bit of a divot in the center I don't really like, right in here. I don't like that, so I'm going to push it a little bit more as I go up. Still not quite what I want, but it's close. Okay. All right, so I've got that cleaned up pretty good. It's all on the inside, about 1/4 inch thick, about a gallon. All right, get the slip off of there, a little bit more slip. It's pretty soft, so I don't want to push much more on it. All right, so clean that up, and what I'll do is I'll make a mark to make the lid on this. Let's see if I can grab the stick tool here. I didn't bring a stick tool, so I'll use a rib. Use a wooden rib. I'm going to clean up the bottom, undercut it a little bit, clean it up a little bit, because I'm going to turn it over and trim it, so I'm not as concerned, but I need to clean it up enough that I can pull it away from the bat. Okay, so this has got to hold a gallon. Let's look at this. Okay, so I'm shooting for a gallon. When I necked it up and pushed it down, what I did is I mushroomed it out a little bit. So liquid gallon, this jug is really, somewhere in here. It's not all the way up here, so it's somewhere in here. Okay, this is a little bit wider than this jug. Okay, a little bit. So if I'm going for a gallon, I want to make sure when I mark where the lid's going to be, it needs to be closer to the top because it's not that high. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mark for where the lid is going to be cut. So this is one piece, and I'll actually do my gallery, my gallery, which is where the lid rests upon, by manipulating and trimming before it gets too hard. Okay, so I'm going to mark the lid. So I want to get enough clay, for me, I want to get enough clay in here that when I cut this lid loose, I can manipulate this a little bit and make a good gallery for that to set down into. Okay, so that shape. All right. And I'm thinking I'll do one of my, this will be one of those odd creature burial urns that be becoming more and more popular. I think I'll actually do one of my odd frog sculpted handles for this. Okay. So once this dries out a little bit, I'll take a needle tool, turn it again, take a needle tool and cut the lid loose. But be careful, it's too soft obviously. And then I'll have that lid and sculpt a handle on top of it. I could have done what I was thinking of doing, but I got distracted, is I could have just pinched it completely closed, pulled it up, pinched it completely closed, and did the handle like that. That's another way to do a handle, a grab handle. But I'm thinking I'm going to go for a sculpting thing to salvage my distractions. All right? So, hey, I'm Dan Goddard, ceramic artist, potter, and this is a 1+ gallon burial urn. It'll shrink to about 1+ gallons. Cheers. Blessings.